This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
We have a really good roster, a really strong roster. We're always on the lookout for opportunities to make it stronger, whether we're able to do that via a trade in the coming days or free agency with the opening of free agency. I don't know. We're going to be on the lookout, but right now I want to manage expectations. I don't expect anything, to be honest. Certainly nothing major. Like last year, we had a really big off season to kind of, I think, set a new course, thrust us in a more upward direction in terms of climbing towards another championship. You're not able to do that every year. So I expect things to be quiet. If we can't improve the team now, we'll still be on the lookout in August and September and December prior to the trade deadline. We're always on the lookout. But right now, I'm not looking for anything specific.
I'll tell you what, some other teams are, though, aren't they? Let it begin.
Yeah.
Let it begin, partner.
I think maybe the bigger news happened prior to July 1. We'll see. There's still some players out there that are UFAs that teams are going to be interested in gobbling up, but Mitch Marner has a new home, right?
That's the biggest
one. Was that the biggest one that dropped yesterday?
Has to be, right?
Yeah. That is a great move for Vegas, and it's a great move for Mitch Marner. I'm actually a little concerned about Vegas's defense. Maybe concerned's the wrong word, but like Pietrangelo looks like his career is done. They traded Nick Hague. As it is, I just looked, they're like $6 million over the cap. Now maybe they'll get relief with the Pietrangelo if he retires or whatever is going to happen. But you put Eichel and Marner together.
That's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, and
elite.
It's just going to be a different vibe for Mitch Marner. Like, he has been in the pressure cooker environment of Toronto. Vegas is going to be a whole different vibe for him.
Yep.
Think of all the players that have gone to Vegas and thrived, too, that they've added through the years.
And you wonder, too, there is something to be said for playing in that type of environment in Toronto.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're Mitch Marner and you can hit the open market and you can get away from that constant talk day in and day out about how much you've underachieved, makes sense to maybe not want to be there. I don't know. I mean, you tell me.
Well, I mean, look, I think it's a great move for Marner. I think it's a great move for Vegas. Yeah. The Leafs were going to lose him. I mean, it sounded like so they got something for him, kind of like, the Lightning made a trade with Carolina to get Gensel's rights so they could sign him to the 8-year deal. That's basically what Vegas and Toronto did. And Toronto got Nick Waugh, who's a really good player. Like, he's a high-end fourth-line center. That's been his role with Vegas. Yeah. So, look, that takes some of the sting away, maybe, for the loss of Marner. But there's just no getting around this, Greg, that the Maple Leafs are going to be without a guy they've had on their roster who is one of the best offensive players in the NHL.
Yeah.
Their team is going to be very, very different. Now, it doesn't mean they can't have success.
Yeah.
But it's just going to be different.
I think you're right. I mean, I think it's, can you win differently?
Yeah.
They've wanted to be better defensively. Berube comes in and maybe there's a different mentality on how to play. It's going to be interesting to see how this affects Austin Matthews, because he is losing a teammate who's point per game guy. It's hard to do in today's game. So
and as we say, like, what has happened prior to now doesn't necessarily tell us what's going to happen in the future. But, Marner was very, very durable. Like, for a guy who's slight, let's call him. Right. He's not the biggest guy in the world. Like, he has been very durable. Sure. Matthews, on the other hand, and maybe it's just the style of game he plays a little bit. I mean, he's not an overly physical guy, but he's a big, strong man. He's had a lot of injury problems. I mean, not a lot, but he's had injury problems the last couple of years. He missed a chunk of last year. So let's see how he does. I hope for his sake that he can kind of stay healthy, right, and play. But the Leafs are going to be different. And, I think the division kind of got knocked on its end a little bit based on, what we're seeing and what we're not seeing. I mean, did the Bruins do anything to give you belief that they will be able to get back to where they were? there was talk when they traded Marchand, maybe Marchand will come back to Boston.
Yeah.
No, not really. We can get into what the Panthers did, which is a whole other topic. But we have John Rosso, who's the Lightning's director of amateur scouting, joining us at the bottom of the hour. And I guess free agency has started at 12 noon. We can give you some Lightning news since last week, Greg. So I know a lot of fans are worried about the Gage Gonsalves thing. Ed Encina, I think, so he tweeted something out yesterday, and I have a feeling Ed got this from people in the know.
Sources.
He's like, don't worry, Lightning fans. Yeah, so right. Gonsalves was not given a qualifying offer. People, oh my gosh, because we kind of spelled out what that means. That means you're locking in the player.
Yeah.
There is really, in my mind, only one reason why the Lightning would not have given Gage Gonsalves a qualifying offer, and that is because they don't need that step and that a contract is pending. Will it happen today? Will it happen tomorrow? Who knows? I do not believe that Gage Gonsalves is going anywhere, and that's kind of what Ed indicated. But as we speak today at 12:06, he is a free agent. So theoretically, he could sign with any team. I don't expect that to happen. The other news that happened a couple of days ago was that Connor Sherry was given his unconditional release. Now, we see this sometimes. I've seen it through the years, and to the best of my knowledge, I can't remember if it's happened with a Lightning player. If it has, I'm just not remembering it. But basically what it means is that the team and the player mutually agree to part ways. The other time you can give a player an unconditional release is if it's like for cause. That was not the situation here with Sherry. But Sherry's like, it looks like I'm destined for another year in the minors. He did a great job kind of mentoring some of the younger players in Syracuse last year, but it's clear Sherry wants a shot to play for another NHL team in the NHL, and he didn't see that happening with the Lightning. So if the team and the player agree, the player gets put through waivers. If a team grabs him, the team gets that contract, and Sherry had 1 year left at $2 million per. But if he clears waivers, which is what happened with Sherry, the contract goes away. So by making that move, the Lightning freed up an extra $2 million in cap space, the Sherry contract. So as we look at Puckpedia, as of this minute, the Lightning have $5.4 million in change in cap space. I'm going to go ahead and include Max Crozier in the Lightning's roster, which he's not included in that number, and he signed his extension at $750. So subtract $750,000 from that 5.4 number. And now the Lightning have 7 defensemen. They may add another defenseman. I'm not saying that these are the 7 defensemen, but to try and wrap our head around, like, what might the Lightning do in free agency? How much money do they have? If we're adding Crozier as the 7th defenseman, essentially replacing Perbix, you're at about, what, $4.7 million. I do believe there is going to be a contract for Gonsalves. Whatever number you want to give Gonsalves there, I'm not going to project, but there should be money left, right? If you add the forward that we presume to be Gonsalves, the Lightning are 12 forwards, 7 defensemen, 2 goalies. That's 21 players. They could add up to 2 more, and they would have, in whatever you want to allocate for Gonsalves, certainly more than $1 million. Like, they're going to have a little bit of wriggle room here. And then the question, Greg, is, do you want to spend to the cap? Or do you want to give yourself a little bit of room so that you can carry 23 and not be like $5 under the cap or whatever, and potentially have to play short? By short, I mean not carrying the full 23, which is what they did most of last year. So to me, that seems like the Lightning are in pretty good shape. What this also means is that they're not going to be in the market for a $5-6 million player. And that is kind of what Julian indicated in the clip Steve played at the top of the show.
I think a lot of people are going to be looking at this and saying, okay, is a trade in play still? You know,
that would free up more money too.
And that would free up more money. And maybe strategically you're getting somebody back that I don't want to say has more of a future with you, but I feel like with trades, you're able to identify somebody a little bit more in your wheelhouse rather than in free agency where you're going to probably overpay for that person. And there's probably, you know, a certain ceiling that player has, but you know what you're going to get. If you make a trade and you're able to get somebody who has some term, has some upside, you might have to give up a little bit more to get that player, because I think that in some ways is valuable, especially for the Lightning, who feel like there doesn't have to be a complete overhaul of this team, maybe just some pieces here and there to get where they need to be. And I think that's in play. The question always becomes, what are you giving up to get somebody back in return?
Right.
And I think the Lightning, one of the things that I've always come back to, partner, and you brought this point up, is that I think Julian just really likes his team. And I'm not sure an overhaul or, going out and making a blockbuster trade is something that he necessarily feels like he has to do. And, maybe this was something, when we talk about Toronto and why they had to get rid of Marner for a couple of reasons. But how much was Toronto's struggles in the playoffs just based off the fact that they had a really good team they had to get by and couldn't? And not necessarily it was on them. I mean, they had a good team. But as a GM, do you have to take a step back, multiple steps back, and say, yeah, we didn't get out of the first round again. That is disappointing.
Well, this year they did, but
correct.
They didn't get to where they wanted
to go. And do you have to take a step back and look at it and say, it's more about the teams we're playing and we're just running into a really good team than it is, hey, I think you need to address your back end, or I think you need to address your second line center because you have some serious deficiencies there. You may end up doing that anyways. But I think for Tampa Bay, and maybe to a lesser degree Toronto, although again, you give up Marner like that, you don't ever replace it. I always go back to a saying, and I forget what GM made it, but basically, when you make a trade, whoever gets the best player in return wins the trade. A lot of times people will sit there and say, well, you gotta give it 5 years. Let's see how this plays out. And I think it was actually during the time when Yager was traded to the Caps, and the Penguins got like all these prospects back. One of them was Chris Beach, and they're making this comparison. He's going to be the next Ron Francis. And I remember it stood out for me. Somebody made, I thought, an astute observation back then, is that let's not overplay this. Whoever gets the best player in return typically wins the trade. And in that instance, I mean, that was 100% true. And I think you could probably make the same case with Vegas. You get Mitch Marner. I don't care who Toronto got back. Maybe they did a nice job to stay above water a little bit because they got an NHL player.
Yeah.
But Mitch Marner, you and I are very high on him. He's an elite player. Vegas probably is going to say, you know what, we'll figure out some other stuff. You give me him to work with. We feel pretty good. We're going to figure this out.
That's kind of been Vegas's MO.
Yeah.
I mean, the first year, no. George McPhee was very astute in assembling a roster that got them all the way to the Stanley Cup final in year one. But they have been a bold player in free agency / trades.
Yeah.
Basically since then. Think about the moves, whether it was Mark Stone or Pacioretty, like Eichel. I mean, they take big swings as an organization.
They really
this
do.
is a big swing.
They really do. And to bring it back to the Lightning, we've had people say, are they going to make a big swing? I mean, there's always a chance. There's always a chance that
we heard Julian's
gets creative
statement, though, at the beginning of the show. He's like, last year was the year that we kind of set a, I don't want to say set a different course, but kind of reset the same course and push the team forward in a way that he really, really liked.
Correct.
He liked what they did last year. It's just that 5-game loss in the first round to Florida is sitting, understandably so, not well with Lightning fans.
Right.
So the reaction is, must make changes. Well, I mean, Florida did to the Lightning kind of what they did to Toronto in the second half of that series, and certainly what they did to Carolina. So let's look at Carolina. I'm not saying the Lightning were Carolina, because Carolina won 2 rounds, the Lightning didn't. But Florida dismantled the Hurricanes just like they dismantled the Lightning. And Carolina got to the conference final.
Right.
Now they have other baggage because they've been deep in the playoffs and kind of can't get over the hump. But like, if in some weird parallel universe we had said, well, what if the Lightning had gotten to the third round and been dismantled by the Panthers? Would this feeling be the same? Or was it that it was the first round? Or is it that the Panthers are in their division? Or is it that they didn't like the way the Lightning looked, fans, in this particular series, and they got outplayed in this series? But Julian's job is to not knee-jerk. Generally,
correct.
General managers who knee-jerk are making moves not in the best interest of their team. And I think that we've heard this from him both at the end of the season when he had his press conference and when he was asked questions after the draft, which John Rosso will be joining us if you're joining us late at the bottom of the hour to talk about the 8 draft picks. The Lightning made a trade with Pittsburgh, added a 4th-round pick. So they had 8 players they took. They got 5 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goalie. And they seem very, very happy with the players that they added. Another thing that came out of the press conference that Julian did with the media was they were not able to move Isaac Howard. So as it stands right now, Isaac Howard is still a member of the Lightning's organization.
Right.
And if he does not sign between now and August of 2026, the Lightning will get a 2nd-round pick in 2027 as compensation. It is Julian's preference to try and trade him.
Yeah,
but
it's funny.
They weren't able to get a deal done.
My dad reached out to me and he said there's some rumblings over here in Pittsburgh that the Penguins are going to, package. I forget who was the player. And it might have been some draft picks because Kyle Dubas has accumulated now a lot of draft picks over the last couple of years, and he had mentioned that Howard would be a guy that potentially would be coming back. He mentioned another prospect. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but
what Julian said, Greg, if you heard the press conference, he said, "Look, we have talked. He's been in conversations with Howard's agent, and he's talked to other teams. So he's like, either the teams that we're talking with that are giving us a return that we think is appropriate, Howard is not interested in going to those teams, and the teams that Howard is interested in going to, we can't work a deal out. In other words, they're not offering enough for Julian to accept it. So
I don't even know if
I don't know which category Pittsburgh fell in.
I don't even know if they have room for this. This is going down the fun rabbit hole. It was Brian Rust, because Brian Rust now, I think it's starting today, doesn't have that protection of the no trade clause. Like, I think there are some teams now, and Pittsburgh's in this situation where they're probably going to one more bad year before maybe things start to turn the corner a little bit. And I got to tell you right now, this is purely speculation, but you know how I feel about if the Lightning get a Brian Rust, that is a dynamite pickup. For a prospect who doesn't want to play here in Tampa, and you can get that guy who's great on the PK, who's big in big moments, and who can score and play with skilled players, and just the only thing with him is he's got to stay healthy. I would make that deal over and over again. So that was
we don't know which teams fell into which category. It was either that Howard didn't have an interest in going to the team, or Julian didn't feel that the return was worth making the trade.
Correct.
At least not at this point.
Not at this point.
They are assured of a 2nd-round pick.
Yeah.
But he would like to get more than
sure.
that, which is understandable.
So maybe we'll bring Julian on the show and we'll ask him about that rumor.
And another Lightning news, development camp is kind of sort of underway. I guess TGH Iceplex had a power outage. I'm right down the road from them, and we didn't have a power outage.
Still on for you, right?
They had, I didn't lose power yesterday, but they had a problem, and I guess it affected the ice or something happened, so there's no on ice today. But they are going to have on ice tomorrow. It'll be an abbreviated on ice 4 or 5 day session.
Yeah.
But the annual 3-on-3 tournament, which is going to be open to the public, starts on Thursday afternoon and concludes Friday late morning. So those are always interesting games to come out and watch. And the 3-on-3 allows for the skill to take over. It's not so much the two-way guys. I mean, it kind of is because you're playing man on man mostly, but it's just a different kind of look. But you can kind of see from the players what they've got in their toolbox.
Is that a little bit like flag football? At that point, 3-on-3, we're not going to really hit you. It's about skill. And, I can see some things, but I'm not really going to make a huge determination on how you play 5-on-5 because I do think that is drastically different. But I think it is interesting. We are getting some questions, and this might be a good segue.
Yeah, let's
Champa
do
Bay.
some questions because we have about 10 minutes before John
Yeah.
Rosso joins us.
So Champa Bay on X says, so how are we supposed to stop this Panthers team? Which can lead into the Panthers, had a couple of decisions to make. One, they could have let some guys go, and that's just the ever-changing landscape of playing in a salary cap, even though we know it's going up over the next couple of years. But having a team, come back and try and do a three-peat is hard to do. Basically with the same roster, probably harder to do. They almost like doubled down, partner, and just said, "Okay, well, we're going to keep you. We're going to keep you."
Yeah, they basically are going to be bringing back the same team next year.
So
Nate
his
Schmidt
question
is
is
not going to be back.
No.
Yeah.
How are we supposed to? How are the Lightning supposed to?
All
stop
right.
This
I feel like
Panthers team?
we've talked about this a lot, but now that we kind of know, okay, it's not just Bennett's back, Ekblad's back, Marchand's back. They brought back their fourth line. That was their fourth line at the end of the playoffs. Nosek, Greer, and Gadjevich.
Right.
That they didn't really actually play in the Lightning series except Greer for a couple of games. So I'm going to say this one more time. We can get into this certainly next year when we lift the curtain on 25-26, and we'll see how things look. Just because the Panthers were, as I use this term, virtually unbeatable in the 2025 playoffs does not mean a year from now, even though they're going to have many of the same players, that is also going to be the case. It does not mean that. Those players reached an extraordinarily high level, and it was an extended period of time. It was a couple of months. But to do that again is not guaranteed.
It is not.
And for some of these guys, the ones that are in their late 30s now, they are going to be a year older. So, look, they gave Marchand, what is he, 37? They gave him a 6-year deal. Mm-hmm. So, look, people are like, well, maybe he's going to, not play out the contract. It's more about next year, et cetera, et cetera. Bobrovsky's, 37, 38? And as it stands right now, they are over the cap by over $2 million, and they only have 21 players under contract. That's not including Mackie Samoskevich, who's a prospect. They got to get him re-signed. He's an RFA.
Right.
So they're going to have to shed some money before the season begins. We have no idea if the Panthers are going to be as dominant next year. And I'm just going to say in the playoffs, because they weren't dominant during the regular season. For them to play at that level for 82 games is not going to happen. So figure that they're going to be good enough in the regular season to get in the playoffs. They're going to go for their 3 in a row. Who knows? Who knows if they're going to stay as healthy as they did? Who knows if the players are going to reach the level that they reached? It's not fantasy hockey. It's not just like throwing the paper list of the roster and saying it's going to be magic again. They found magic last year. Who knows what's going to happen? If the wear and tear is going to catch up with them, I don't know. Maybe they will be. But I don't think that we can, from the Lightning's perspective, if you're a Lightning fan, stop worrying about the Panthers. Enough. We've seen it too many times. Too many times great teams are still really, really, really good, but they aren't quite able to replicate that championship level. There's a reason why there has not been a team to win 3 Stanley Cups in a row since the Islanders in the 80s. And it's a good reason, because it's extraordinarily difficult. So, look, good for the Panthers. Bill Zito was like, I want to bring the band back. He did it. Now they're going to have, so on the other side, they're going to have major, major cap problems moving forward. They're going to have to move money. They're going to be right up against it all year unless, they find a way to free up some money somehow. It's probably going to be very difficult for them to add at the deadline. All these players have had multiple long playoff runs, unless they just joined the Panthers last year. And who knows? Who knows? They're all good players, great players. They play very well as a team, but what we saw from them over that 2-month period was exceptional and extraordinary. And I just don't know if you can presume that that's going to happen again.
It's one of those things, too, I think, where you you don't get caught up in the emotion of trying to repeat or three-peat in this instance. But if you're a general manager, do you look at this and say, if it fits, I love our team. We owe it to them.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can do history. You're almost not forced to come back, but you're like, let's just see what happens.
And the other part of this,
You know?
which is kind of good news, bad news for the Panthers, after this year, because the cap's going up again, the Bobrovsky $10 million contract comes off the book. So they're going to have room after next season. But then the question is, all right, are you going to re-sign Bobrovsky? He won't take $10 million. I'm sure he'll take a lot less. But if he's your guy, he's going to be bumping 40 at that point. Who's your answer in net? Right?
Sure.
They added, who did they add? They added a goalie. I'm trying to remember who they added. They signed him too. I'm looking him up.
I can't remember.
I don't know if he's going to be, is it Vanacek? Oh, Tarasov from Columbus.
That's right.
Who has been, let's be honest, like a little unproven. I mean, of course, they found some good players from Columbus, right? Whether it was Seth Jones, who I know understand went to Chicago in between. Bobrovsky came from Columbus.
Sure.
But look, stop worrying about the Panthers if you're a Lightning fan.
You know what, though?
That's my recipe for peace of mind during the offseason.
That's not going to go away, though.
It's not going to go away, but we're just way too early to start thinking about a potential matchup in April of 2026.
You're right. Come September, we'll do it.
Yeah.
You
That
and I
will
will
be 6
sit down.
months away, right?
That will be 6 months away. And that first game that they play will be crazy. I tell you what, though, is there another player who's really, I don't want to say turned his career around, but maybe his legacy might be too strong. Sam Bennett.
Yeah.
Considering
but
what he
you
got,
brought that
like
up
what he
last
got.
week. I
But, like,
remember
what he got.
it was almost from the minute he arrived in South Florida, he was a different player. He came during the I want to say he came during the 2021 season.
Yeah.
And the Lightning saw him in that playoff year when the Lightning won in 6. I remember he took that bad major penalty in game 1. He boarded Coleman, if I'm remembering right, and the Lightning scored on the power play, and it helped them win game 1. But Bennett has been a difference-making type of player for the Panthers from the get-go. Having said that, I think he reached another level in this playoff year, and that's why
Let me ask you this.
Conn Smythe.
Just completely random question, but I feel like we always talked about Tom Wilson being a unique player because of his size and his hands. Can we say Sam Bennett is there's somebody in that same category with the physicalness, being able to hold? He can drop. See, your dog agrees. Yeah, that's a dog.
Or they
with a bone.
disagree. I'm not sure.
But I think Sam Bennett, Tom Wilson, in terms of the fear they can impose on the ice, protecting teammates, fighting, playing over the line, but also they're skilled enough they can play. Now, maybe you think Tom Wilson is more skilled than Sam Bennett or vice versa, whatever. I feel like for a long, long time, Tom Wilson was unique. And he still is.
Wilson has, it's not quite like Scott Stevens, but Wilson will blow you up.
Yes.
If you have your head down.
He will.
And Bennett is physical, and Bennett toes the line for sure.
He goes over the line.
But I'm not sure they're the same type of player.
Yeah.
Bennett's also a center. I view them a little differently. But I understand what you're saying. They both can fight, although I think Wilson is regarded as. Bennett's tough.
Bennett's not going to. You got to go.
Bennett will not
go.
back down. Bennett had that big fight with Sergachev in the preseason a couple of years ago.
Yes.
I remember you're like, Sergachev took some big blows.
That was the first
Bennett.
time I saw Sergachev be like, whoa, we got,
Right. I think Wilson's in a little bit of a different class, although as often is the case when you're a player like a Tom Wilson, who you made your name for yourself by fighting.
Yes.
But then you're also a very effective player and an important player. As you kind of move through your career, you become a little bit more selective in dropping the gloves. And I think Wilson is now at that point.
That's fair.
I'm not sure I quite see them the same way, but they're both very, very effective.
They're very good at what they do.
Players, yes.
I know we got to get to a guest here shortly, but Karen on X says, what do you think about bringing Tanner Jeannot back? his size is certainly something we need. I was seeing the Athletics, and they had the unrestricted free agents.
Yeah,
I wouldn't bring him back.
The Kings decided not to bring him back. I don't know. I don't know if the Lightning are going to do that.
I mean, I love what he does.
I wouldn't be surprised. So however many free agents the Lightning add, or if they make a trade, which you brought up, but they're going to need to add some bodies. And if they're not entering camp saying, yes, we're going to rely on these prospects in Syracuse, bank on them coming up, I wouldn't be surprised if the player or players that are added fall into the gritty category. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it's not Tanner Jeannot, but a player like a Tanner Jeannot.
Yeah.
I still think addressing the face-off loss of Glendening is something that Julian may have his eye on. We'll see.
I would agree. I think that's because that's one of those where that changes the game in a lot of ways if you can win face-offs. But I think also with that, you have to get somebody who is not a liability out there too in the other facets of the game.
Yeah.
You got to win some face-offs. There's no doubt about it. You got to be able to play. And I think, we'll see what he's able to accomplish from that perspective. But Tanner Jeannot, you know what I think hurt him a little bit for the Lightning? I think his first year, there were some expectations that he was going to be a 20-goal scorer and a power forward. We talked about Tom Wilson, right? We talked about Tom Wilson.
He had been his first full year in the NHL.
Right. I think what we're seeing is that probably isn't Tanner Jeannot.
He also had unfortunate for him, but he had a lot of injuries.
He did.
During his time with the Lightning.
He did.
That affected him.
He can be valuable, and there's no question. I think with what the Lightning want to do and how they want to play, I'm not sure that's the route they want to go at Bolts Radio. If you want to get involved, I'm going to get my phone here, partner, to see if we
do we have any breaking news? I've been looking at you. I haven't gone on to the news sites.
No, I haven't. Well, the good thing is we have Steve there, too, and Steve always sets us straight. Dustin, this was 10 minutes ago, says, happy free agency day, gentlemen. I think the Lightning could make huge moves if they decided that was necessary. But I have a different outlook. The league, about 8 to 10 years ago, put emphasis on interference. No one touches players entering the zone who don't have the puck. Small players benefited massively. The league since has gone away from that standard and has leaned back into anything goes until we decide to call a penalty. I think the Lightning need to sign at least 2 big, strong, physical, and potentially fast guys for the bottom 6. We have to have Florida's mentality. Injure everyone on the opposite side for victory.
All right, so I actually just said this. I didn't frame it as they need to do this. I framed it as I wouldn't be surprised if whoever is new to the Lightning this year has that physical component. But to say that they are moving off the standard of like not calling interference, I'm not sure if that's the case. I mean, generally, and they're two different things. I mean, it's not like the Panthers obstructed. It's not like the Panthers were the reincarnation of the 99 New Jersey Devils or anything like that. They just punished you. They finished their checks. They were committed to taking the body, and they took the body hard and consistently. But that's different than saying, the league is backing off the no obstruction. Now we're allowing obstruction. I'm not sure that I saw that in the playoffs.
I mean, look, in the playoffs that happens. We know that. And, things happen in the playoffs that don't necessarily always happen in the regular season. Mm-hmm. But we've talked about that.
Brock Besser re-signed in Vancouver.
So there was some talk he was going to bail, but, goal scorer.
They also re-signed Thatcher Demko. I mean, look. There's a reason why they won the division a couple of years ago. They have some high-end players. They had the problem with whatever it was with JT Miller and Pettersson, and Miller's now, with the Rangers. I think they got a pretty good guy in return from the Rangers, but, they have Quinn Hughes, Pettersson. Like, they have some really good players, and Demko has had a lot of injury problems, but if they signed him to a big extension, maybe they feel that he's finally on the road to health, and he was a big part of why they had success 2 years ago. John Rosso is ready, so
should we go to John?
Let's bring in the director of amateur scouting.
John, how are you? Is John with us? Oh, we're getting him.
There he is.
Welcome to Power Lunch.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I know it's been pretty busy for you over the last handful of days, really probably all year, as you're looking at some of these prospects and players. Overall, from where you sit, how did things transpire over the weekend?
Really good. It's always tough when you have to sit there and, through the first round, you're waiting and waiting and waiting. So
Yeah.
get a little antsy, but everything worked out well. It was a different format this year compared to the past. I don't know how long they've done the draft that way, but for decades it's been the same as being on a draft floor, one site. So it was a little different being
Right.
at Emily Arena and having a little more space and being able to communicate and being able to talk a little bit more with the scouts. So on our side, it was really good.
So I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name yet until I talk to him, but Ethan, who you took in the second round. So I heard your post-draft press conference, and it sounded like you were actually surprised he didn't go in the first round. I understand different organizations have different eyeballs, different rankings, but like in your mind, was that a swing and miss by some other teams? And how surprised were you that he dropped to you guys in the second round?
I was surprised. You get a feel throughout the draft and putting your list together about the range and where we're picking at 56 overall, where that's going to kind of fall on our list. And you get a range of, say, 8 to 10 guys that, okay, there's, this would be great, but there's a low percentage chance that this player is going to be here. And then there's like, okay, I'm pretty sure that this player or this player will be there. So you're trying to map it out and play it out in your head, different scenarios. But I don't know if it was a swing and miss. Everyone sees something different. I just thought that, I should say our whole staff thought Ethan Zada has, to help
Thank
out, has played for Team Canada in multiple events, U17, U18, Holinka to start his draft year. So you just think of a player that's been in a lot of high profile, highly scouted tournaments. And you just think that he's a pretty well-known player. So you just never know the draft. It just takes one team to like a player, and then you get that guy who goes a little higher than you expected or a little later than you expected. But at that point in the draft, you just never know. So you just have to be prepared for however it falls.
John, I'm curious. Lightning have had a lot of success drafting and developing players regardless of where those kids are drafted. What are some qualities you think the prospects you draft need to have in order to be successful in the Lightning organization?
It starts with the character, and both on and off the ice. I think you have to have, one, be a good teammate. Like, that's the first thing. You come into the locker room, you're just not doing it by yourself. You're part of a team. And you have to want to be a hockey player. It's one thing to like all the attention and everything else, especially nowadays with kids. Social media is a huge influence. It's there nonstop. They're always on their phone. So it's the wanting to be a hockey player, not for the notoriety, but more for, I really want it. I'm really into this. This is, no matter what, if hey, you're gonna run into adversity at some point. You're gonna run into being scratched, not being on the first power play, the higher you go up. So I think the character and wanting to be a hockey player no matter what, and having that grit to push your way through some tough times is a big thing.
It seems to me the task of just assessing how many amateur players that are out there, like, that is just mind-boggling to me. That, I mean, every team has to do it. There are so many leagues. There are so many players. I know you have eyeballs on all these leagues, but what is the challenge of integrating all of this? Like, you're getting this information. You're getting information through the year because a player in October may progress by the time we hit February and March, maybe is a much better player. Like, your job is to kind of assess this and streamline it in some way. Like, how do you do that with all of the information that you're receiving from all of your scouts?
It starts actually the year before that they are draft eligible. So we'll run an underage list, and guys will start putting names together and building that. And then once those players are draft eligible, they at least have a book on them and know what to expect. And so I rely on our area guys for all the information going into the draft year, because I'll see some, but they'll see way more than I do. So they paint a pretty good picture with their reports on them as a 16-year-old, and then when they're 17 and they're draft eligible, you're trying to take all the information and you're going from league to league, Ontario League over to Europe, everything, and trying to mesh it all together. All the area guys run their own lists, and then there's a big list, and you're trying to slot them all together in the right order. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of meetings, and we spend a lot of time, whether it's in rinks talking about players, in between periods. I like being in the rinks with our area guys, because we can just have those normal conversations. It's one thing to do it over the phone or whatever, but if you're just sitting there and just something pops in your head, and like it can lead you down a path to having a better understanding of the player. But it's you go with a wide net, and you slowly, as you go through the meetings and you go through the seasons, you start to narrow everything down. And then by the time hopefully you get to our end of the season meetings in May, you have a pretty good idea of the guys that you like, and then it's doing all the background work and injuries and doing all I call it more of a private investigator at that point. Like, the hockey's kind of over, so now we got to make sure everything else is good to go. But yeah, it's a long process, and it starts before their draft, and dozens and dozens of reports on these players, and we try to do the best job we can, but no one ever feels comfortable until you have to finally go, okay, we're done. The list is done. It's time to draft. This is what we got.
John, one of the things we've talked about on this show and on the broadcasts over the years, the NHL has gotten better. I mean, a lot of young talent coming in, and it seems like everybody has a skills coach or, a skating coach. And I'm wondering, for you, when you're evaluating these prospects, is it less about the skill because all these guys can play and more about hockey IQ? And does that make it harder to find those guys to separate themselves, or is it easier to find somebody who sticks out because they have a high hockey sense or hockey IQ?
I think it makes it harder. Everyone, as a scouting staff, every organization is getting better and better, so it makes it harder and harder to find players. And that's just not having a bigger scouting staff. It's knowing what you're looking for, sticking to the things that you really value as an organization. So, the scouts are getting better, the players are getting better, but the players, it's the margins between players are really small for the most part. I mean, you have the top of the draft where some guys just stick out, whether it's a McDavid year or whether it's whoever is going to go first overall this year, Schaefer, but those guys stick out like a sore thumb, and then it's really small differences between the players. So it's only getting harder. Organizations are getting better, players are getting better. So those are small little differences that you're looking for as you go through, and sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5, 10 times to try to, because you're not always going to see the same player. Like, I tell our scouts, like, hey, you guys think you have your A game every time you show up to a game. Like, that's not how it works. Like, delayed flights, something's going on at home, bad hotel room. Like, you're never really as sharp as you think you are. It's the same thing with, you're expecting a 17, 18-year-old kid to be the same way every single time. You got to keep watching them to see those differences. Sometimes they're going to be at their best, sometimes they're going to be okay, and sometimes they're not going to be very good. And you don't know why that is. It could be they failed a test at school. They could be injured, and you have no idea, and they're not bringing up, and they're playing through something, and you're just going, wow, they don't look the same. So it's all those viewings that hopefully over time give you a bigger picture of going, okay, I've seen him really good, I've seen him okay, and I've seen him on his worst. And his good is really good, and the draft is all about projection. So you're looking for, even if he's just okay, does he have an effect on the game?
Last one for me, John. I wanted to ask about the challenge for your European scouts, because for a lot of these European teenagers, they may be, if they're good and they're playing in the top league, they're playing among men. Maybe they're not getting power play time. Maybe they're not getting top minutes. Maybe they're scratched. Who knows? Then you have the international tournaments where they are featured, but that's like, what, 5, 6 games. So how challenging is it for your scouts to kind of parse through all that and find the nuggets, right? either they're not getting as much ice time based on the league they're in, or maybe they had a bad week, but this tournament shouldn't discount drafting them.
The European scouts have probably the hardest, just because they're not comparing apples to apples. And these kids will play at a U18 level, a U20 level, and sometimes they're playing in the men's league. And if they're playing in the men's league, as you mentioned, for the most part, they're not getting a regular shift. They're getting less ice time. Sometimes they're scratched, and sometimes they're moving between team to team. And our guy will show up to the game and go, "Oh, I didn't know. No one told me he got sent down. He's with his J20 team." So it's really tough for those guys, and those international tournaments are really important because you finally get to see them in their age group, and comparing them to their age group is the best way for a scout to kind of gauge where they are in the draft. All those kids in their age group are draft eligible, so if they can do it in the men's league, then okay, like, should be really good in his own age group. But you can't gather enough information watching him play in the men's league with 3 minutes of ice time, or sometimes they don't even play and they just sit there on the bench. So seeing them play a prominent role in their age group at the tournaments is huge. So we always bring, no matter where the tournament is, if it's an international tournament, we always bring all of our European guys there just so they can get those viewings.
Last question for me, and it's interesting too, John, because, and maybe it's still this way, certain countries, you have players that come out there that play a certain way. Maybe Russia, it's very skilled. The Finns, maybe it was, I don't know, goaltending or great two-way play, whatever that is. Is that still the same for a lot of these countries? Has anything changed, and where can you kind of fill in those blanks with some of the countries that with players and how they come out?
For sure, the Finnish national teams, they play a very structured, very team-oriented game, and they rely on everyone being on the same page and being able to execute their system almost flawlessly to compete against a much bigger and deeper hockey country, say like Canada or anything like that. The Swedes are always very skilled. They always are offensively creative and always hardworking. But it's different from the European style to the North American League style, whether it's U.S. or Canada. Right. It's much more physical, much more in-your-face type of hockey. It's a little different. So you see the different countries play each other and who can pull the other country into their playing style, right? Like it's like that, on any level, but on a country-to-country level, it's the same thing.
Well, John, we appreciate you take some time to come here on Power Lunch in the off season. I know it's busy time for you, but congrats on the draft. Best of luck moving forward. We'll talk to you down the road.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
All right. John Rosso joining us right there, and always good to get somebody within the organization, right, partner? Thanks, Steve, for getting that done for us. Kind of see where these prospects are and, head of the draft and development for Tampa Bay. I mean, look, we may not hear about some of these guys for a few years. It's just kind of, I feel like the NHL and Major League Baseball with their drafts, it takes a while. When you're drafting kids.
They're trying to project. I mean, if they're drafted at 18, they're scouting them 16, 17.
Yeah.
You're trying to project what this player is going to look like at 22, 23, when physically just going to be a lot more mature, right? And it's rare. I mean, the McDavids of the world are the unicorns, right? Like, sure. You're going to know, no matter what, they're going to excel. For just about everybody else, you do have to project. Speaking of projecting, we projected that a contract might be in the works for Gage Gonsalves, and look at this.
Happened.
We're on the air still, and the news has come down. Lightning have re-signed Gage Gonsalves to a 2-year deal. The AAV is $1.2 million. So he's getting a raise, but it's not a big raise. So if you factor in the 1.2 for Gonsalves, and let's add in Crozier just for the sake of adding him in at whatever it was, $775. So, I mean, you're basically looking at about $2 million for those two players. That'll take the Lightning's available cap space. It's basically the Sherry contract. It's going back to 3.4. So you have $3.4 million to add in free agency, or just fill out your roster some way, somehow.
It's good value. I mean, he probably more than anybody, I think, took those steps in becoming a regular for the Lightning.
He was the most improved player on the Lightning last year. And I say that understanding Brandon Hagel is, if he's not a superstar, like he is now viewed as a high-end NHL player, but Hagel was viewed favorably coming into last. I think he took a step forward last year, but in terms of like, is this guy going to be an NHLer? To this guy is an NHLer. Like that was Gonçalves' trajectory this year. So good for him and a well-deserved extension.
You need those young guys to come up and support the veterans. You just do. It's today's NHL, and that's how you're going to continue to be competitive. Corey Perry, by the way, went to L.A. I didn't realize this. But
that is. How are LA King fans going to feel about Corey Perry? They hated him for all those years he was in Anaheim.
They're going to love him, right? They're going to love him now.
Who's the record holder for most NHL teams? Is it Mike Sillinger? Somebody who played for like 15 or 16 NHL teams. Perry is
He's
getting
closing
up
in
there.
now.
After spending, what was it? It's like first 15 plus, more than that, years with Anaheim.
He, you know what's interesting about him is that he had a great playoff for Edmonton. And I think
he did.
Between the regular season and the postseason, it is what it is. Partner, he had 19 goals.
Yeah.
Guy's going to hit 40.
You know who is he will be a coveted addition is Gavrikov. Gavrikov did not return to the Kings. That is a significant blow to the Kings. I am very, very high on Gavrikov. We'll see where he ends up.
Yeah.
Remember, the Kings were, behind Winnipeg, they were the best defensive team in the NHL last year.
Yeah.
Gavrikov was a big, big part of that. Remember, they didn't have Drew Doughty for most of the year.
Correct. I think LA, that's not a terrible signing. I think you know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
With that. And
I'm sure it's low risk. I don't see what the dollar amount is, but
yeah. So that was that just came through, and you're going to see more of these that pop in, and we'll keep you up to date. And I think we're planning on doing a show. Did we say next week too?
Yeah, we talked about maybe this being the last show, but by next week, you got a little vacation coming up. But by next week, I think we'll have a pretty clear idea of. We're kind of projecting, will the Lightning add someone in free agency? Who will it be? Will it be more than one player? By next week, middle of next week, we may have more clarity on that, and we can dive into more questions from fans now that, or by that point, the roster may be even more set than what it looks like right now. And I just want to mention that when we were talking about these numbers with the cap, and Gonçalves will be the 12th forward, that does include Connor Geekie on the NHL roster. That would be my expectation, that Geekie is going to be on the NHL roster all of next year. But, again, he's going to have to show it, right, in preseason and in training camp. By the way, I don't know if the league heard you talking about training camp being too long and the preseason being too long, but did you happen to see the story? There were some leaks, apparently. But it sounds like, and this is good news, the NHL and the PA are working on an extension of the CBA, which I think would go into effect starting next season, not the season we have coming up. But one of the things that they were talking about is going from 82 to 84 games, which is not something that would even out the divisional situation. Right. So you would play 4 games within your division against every team.
Preseason would also be
But to compensate that, I think I read a maximum of 4 preseason games per team. That's it. 4.
Would you take that trade-off? What do you think?
Well, I would. I think management, minimum of 4. I thought it was maximum of 4, Steve. All right, maybe I misread it.
After further
review, management always wants lots of preseason games because they want to see their prospects play.
Right.
All right, could have a 5th. So, in other words, it's basically 4 to 5.
Yeah.
Oh, rule now maximum of 6. I guess I should have read it more carefully. Yeah. As it is, the Lightning play 7. So, look, there are going to be some teams that probably are like,
that's 7 too many.
All 6. Yeah. I would love 4, but Julian Breezeball and company are like, you don't get a vote.
Yeah. But if we think preseason doesn't really give you the full picture, do you need 7 to evaluate?
Well, clearly
some of these
7 is
younger
all.
guys?
I thought it was a maximum of 4. I was
Well,
like,
here's the thing
goodness
you would get
gracious,
in-
Greg's going to do a happy dance about this.
So let me just say this: if you do 4 preseason games, you're probably going to get a little bit more intensity in the preseason.
Maybe.
It might be closer to maybe what a early regular season game may look like.
I actually think if you were to talk to the regular NHLers, they would say, I need a game.
Yep.
Maybe a game and a half. They really don't need, usually because they come into such great shape, they really don't need a lot of preseason games, many of them. But I don't know. If they're actually looking at, our team is only playing 4, maybe they want to get 2 of the 4.
Yeah.
It sounds like, though, I got the information wrong. Steve said most teams will probably be in the 5 to 6 range. And also, one other thing that came out, Steve mentioned this, but I read it, there'll be a permanent e-bug allocated for every team. So
but it's going to be somebody.
you have talked about, like, it's kind of a bad look that they have the Zamboni driver come in.
They're not going to have that.
They're not going to have that. You're going to have basically, I mean, look, it's a pretty good gig if you can get it. Because if you're the permanent e-bug, that probably means that, speaking frankly, you're not good enough to play in the minors. Right? You're more of just, you're the e-bug, but you're the permanent e-bug, and you're earning a paycheck, and you're with an NHL team. And, you know, in the case of the Lightning, maybe it means that a guy like Andrei Vasilevsky can take more practices off if he wants to, because you're going to have the second goalie. You're going to have 3 goalies. So if your main guy is like, I'm taking practice off, you still have 2 goalies on the ice.
Right.
And then, of course, if you have 2 injuries to goalies in a game, you have the e-bug there. He's your e-bug.
He's yours.
That makes sense, I think.
About time. Let's go.
Yeah.
NHL.
Yeah, so
Come on.
you approve of some of this stuff.
I approve of some.
They've also talked about
What else have they
implementing some way, somehow, the salary cap in the playoffs. So we've talked about, that we haven't talked about, but I've read that it's like the roster you field in a playoff game has to be cap compliant, even if your overall roster isn't in the postseason. So we'll see how they haven't kind of put the pieces in place on how that would work.
Sure.
But that's not for next year. That's for hockey season 26-27.
Well, we will be talking about recapping free agency probably by the time we hit next week. And if you still have some questions, make sure you hit us up at Bolts Radio. And, you know, who knows? Maybe the Lightning.
We'll keep you posted what day.
Different.
We're not sure just yet. You have a great vacation, my friend. Enjoy some family time away.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Good to get away, right? For a little bit.
Traveling with young
3 little ones
children is always an adventure. Well, you got a real little one. Is Gianna old enough to start babysitting yet? She's like,
she should.
Gianna. Girls, Gianna, we heard girls mature faster than boys. How mature are you? Can you take care of Enzo?
I think if mom and dad wanted to go on a date night, could she watch her sister 100%? Enzo's just a little, you know, he still needs mom and dad to kind of make sure we're still there.
Well, you have a great family trip.
I appreciate it, buddy.
We'll
do it again next
week.
Yeah, we'll have one more show for sure. And, you know, we'll have some good Lightning talk. Get your questions in. Thanks to Steve Ersnick, who helps out, as always, as our producer, John Rosso, who joined us earlier in the show. We appreciate him talking about the Lightning's draft and kind of recapping things a bit. And everybody have a great rest of the week. Stay safe. Happy 4th of July. And you've been listening to Power Lunch right here on Lightning Radio.